Hey, everybody, we are back with
Hello.
episode 4, which is actually part 2 of the viewer and browser, nope, the viewer and timeline episode, which just got to be massive.
We had a lot to say, and we talk a lot. So we're breaking it up for you.
Sometimes we veer off into weird areas.
There's so much to share.
There is. So anyway, we are going to sort of jump back into that episode, and you're going to notice a change in wardrobe. Don't let it spook you. But thanks again, and we'll see you on the other side.
Bippity boppity boo.
Let's get into the timeline.
Oh, best part.
This is Mike's favorite part of this, and
no tracks. Nothing. I mean, magnetic. There's no tracks. It's exactly. Awesome.
So this is the same timeline we've been mucking around with for the last couple episodes, and we're just going to spend a little time in here talking about what the experience is like. So earlier when we looked at the browser, and I'm just going to open the browser back up, and I'm going to let's go to scene 1, scene 90. Great. So
good scene. I remember it.
Right, good scene. So I'll go to take 3. That's what I do. I go to the last take and back it all in from there. So I'm not going to touch anything on the keyboard here. This is all mouse driven. There's also keyboard stuff for this. Because you can skim, you can drag over and say, yeah, all right, I want to go to there, right where she turns with the coffee cup. And then I'm just going to add that to the end of my timeline. For whatever reason, the sound drops out here, but I'm not going to worry about that. And let's just go to the A setup, which is her angle. So she's pours, she looks, and all right, I'm just going to drag over this. You could also do in and out, and I'm going to go ahead and put that at the end of the timeline as well. So it's just a little bit of editing. Go to the B setup, take 3. So, all right, let Tony settle in. She looks. And yeah, we'll take this. We'll just drop it at the end of the timeline. This is pretty simple stuff and a quick way to go through and do your, find the bits that you want. If you have marked anything favorites, those are going to show up as little ranges in here. Let me just mark a favorite on here. So that's the F key again. Select the range and hit the F key. So now if I want to just go through and mark, and here, let's go somewhere else. I'm going to unmark this by doing Option X. If I want to just go through here and select my favorite, it's going to select it, and then I can drop it at the end. So if I've taken the good time and trouble to go through, watch my dailies, mark up my stuff, then I can just go through and pick the best stuff and put it together in a pretty slipshod, fast way, and then go through and do some finessing. So let's talk about the finessing. And again, there are great tutorials on like Ripple training for how to do the specific functions of all this.
We're not going into details here. We're going to get broad strokes.
Right. So first problem is sounds dropped out here for whatever reason. So I'm going to go up to take 1, and I'm just going to replace some sound there after as Tony walks in, and we'll fix it later. But so I'm just going to lasso this bit right until she changes, and click where I want it to start, right there. Click in the timeline, up arrow to go back to the cut, and
Hear me.
Probably me. I'm going to ignore it. Go back to the head of the cut, and then I'm going to say Shift 2, which is picture only. You can see these little icons changing right here, but then Shift 3, which is audio only, and then Q. So that's going to connect that audio. Now I could have just as easily switched to audio only over here and connected that audio down there. So that's one thing to do. You're patching some audio. You wanna bring it in. Now I want to zoom in on the timeline. I love a trackpad for Final Cut because I can pinch and zoom on the timeline. I literally feel handicapped working without it on this. So I want to sort of feather this audio.
If you don't have a trackpad, I think it's Shift and the mouse scroll wheel.
Agony. Just agony. I don't know how you work that way.
I don't like mouse pads. I mean, I don't like your trackpads, yeah.
Yeah, well, it's okay. I'll convert you eventually. But so let's talk about, I want to feather this audio a little bit. Now, you could probably put a dissolve on the audio. You could do let's say, all right, well, I'm going to click here and do it. Command T, put a dissolve on the audio. That's one way people work. I'm going to undo that. Now, but here's the thing where, if you've got this clip and you want to extend it, you're extending picture and sound. The way to get to the sound here, and this is a point of frustration for people, is just double click on the sound and it kind of drops down.
That's it.
And then you're going to edit whatever you're on here. So
notice no foot collision. It just moved out of the way. Again, one of my favorite things about this.
Right.
That is not a channel of audio. That is, I think he said 4 channels of audio right there.
Yeah, well, 2 in this particular one. But
Okay.
Anyway, it keeps it all as compact as possible. Now, the second way to do this might be, all right, well, I'm just going to, like Final Cut 7, I think you needed the P tool to put volume keyframes in. I'm just holding down Option, and it's given me some keyframes here for the audio. So I'm just going to keyframe this audio a little bit and pull it down and pull it down. And then look at me, I got a transition. You know, nice.
You know,
if I want to
grab that little ball at the end and move it over.
We're going to get there.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm jumping ahead.
You know, well, you know, you're an advanced user, so let's do that. I'm going to undo what. Well, here, I just want to show what the problem is here. So, things like dissolves, things like keyframes, they're fixed in a point in time, right? So, if you know, on Avid, when you have something keyframed and you drag some audio from somewhere else and you don't know where the keyframe is, and you have to, you know, all that mishigas. Anyway, so if I drag this over, the keyframes are gone. So where'd the keyframes go? Well, they're still there. Same story there. But let's just undo the keyframing real quick. Final Cut has these little fade handles here. And so get your mouse there and you can do this. And you can do this. And if you right click on the fade handle, whoopsie, you right click on the fade handle, it's going to give you some options as to the kind of fade that you want. And, you know, different stuff works for different situations depending on what you're trying to do. And so now I've got these fade handles. You can see a little variation in the color here, which is indicating there's a fade at the end. But the good thing about them is they travel with it. So if you are making a trim, your fade stays intact. And there's also keystrokes for adding fades to both ends of the clip. So if you find those up in your menus, and it applies sort of a generic fade, I think is definable in the preferences. Let's take a look. Can you see my preference screen, Mike?
No, but
okay.
Go ahead.
All right, well, it's definable in the preferences, the audio fade default duration. And you can set that for whatever you please. So if you're just wanting to apply a bunch of fades to stuff, select a bunch of media and apply the fades, and it'll apply it all appropriately. Now, you're noticing the tracks are expanding here because we did this L cut. So, or is that a J cut? That's a J cut. And so you can also just double click the sound again, and it's going to collapse it up. This has pluses and minuses, I think. You want to see what you've got for audio, but you also want your screen space to be well utilized. In any case, that's another thing you can do. And when you get a lot of tracks built up, you know, you kind of want to try to make good use of your screen
when
space.
When it is hidden, it actually still extends over the edge, and
correct.
Will be there. You just don't see it in that format.
Correct. And so there's a million ways to trim, and let's just talk about the trimming tools for a minute. And we're going to go over. Let's just go through these tools here. The old, it's almost like Final Cut 7, but not quite. So, primary tool is the arrow tool, and A will get you there. So, anytime you mouse over something, like, okay, trim that side, trim that side. If you go to the trim tool, however, it gives you some more stuff. So, this is, you know, trim this transition, or flip this shot, or hold down Option and slide it in context. You still have the stuff where you can just trim an edge if you want to. We were talking earlier about wanting this. I'm going to go back to the A tool, where this piece is connected right here on this shot. So
and
if
I
wanted,
that's hard to see, and it's kind of weird when you begin. You get used to it really quickly. You'll see them. You'll know where they are. It's just hanging out there. Right.
It's just hanging out there, and I want this stuff to stay exactly in sync where it is because it's perfect, but I want to trim this shot. So if I hit the T to trim and I trim back, it's going to mess up the sync on this thing as to where it's happening in the sequence overall. So what I'm going to do is hold down the tilde key, upper left corner of your keyboard, and now it's just going to trim the picture for that. So trimming using the trim tool, trimming using the arrow tool. There's all sorts of trim to playhead, extend edits, stuff like that. Explore the menus and see what's in there. There are one of the interesting ways that Final Cut allows you to trim. I'm going to go A back to the arrow tool. If I double click a transition, you're going to see this open up. And so this is called the precision editor. Sometimes it's great for some things, not great for other things. But basically it's showing you the B side of this clip. Like this is what's in our cut. And then this is the B side. And you can just like play through this and find a spot, and then stop and click there, and it's gonna adjust the cut. I wish there was a keystroke to adjust the cut, but there's not, so I'm not gonna cry about it. And so, you've got the A side of this cut, which is invisible unless you open it up this way, and the B side of this cut. And also, if you just click on these little notches, it's just going to take you to the next cut, next cut, next cut. And you can kind of go through and fiddle with how things are working here. Other interesting thing, I'm going to just put a little dissolve. I'm going to get out of here first, I think. By double-clicking.
This is a preference thing. Not everybody works in this. You don't have to. It is a tool you have at your disposal. I use it every now and then when really messing with if I put some kind of transition effect on two clips. If I'm not doing that, I don't go into the precision editor very much. But it's a nice way to put effects. Yeah,
I think I use it for dissolves and stuff like that, just for customizing, adjusting where they are. But I also, there's always that time when someone says, what happens after that? Like, oh, where does that go? What is he? And so you can either open it up in the timeline and string it out and let it play and see what happened, or you can match back and put it up in your source viewer and play it from there and then kind of not know where you are. Or you can do this and just open it up and say, yeah, here's where it goes. I think it's pretty handy, but I'm just going to throw a dissolve on there real quick by doing Command T. And now if I double click that dissolve, the dissolve is now in there. And so I can stretch this out. I can grab it and sort of move where it begins and ends. There isn't a feature in Final Cut like start at edit, end at edit, center on edit. It's all based on just looking at it and dragging it around here. So in the old days, there was reasons to have dissolves of a certain length, or not use the same footage if you're cutting negative, stuff like that. Not the case here, and so you can manipulate your dissolves, you can manipulate your cuts, and when you're done, just double click and it jumps back to the regular timeline view.
I'm liking the cat hanging out behind your shoulder.
Is there a cat?
Yeah.
Where is it? Oh yeah, asleep. Yeah, it's
there.
I think it's still alive. This is a good thing. Moving on through the tools, we talked about this one earlier, the position tool. So the position tool, if you want to put something in a particular position.
And I like that. We haven't really shown it working as a magnetic timeline very much yet. You want to show, you just put that audio under the cafeteria. You want to show what happens, how those are magnetized. If you move the video clip, the audio goes with it.
Yeah. Well, there's a few things. So let's look at a couple things here. Now, I decided I want to swap the order of these shots. So I'm just going to grab this shot. I'm going to use the A tool, not the P tool. I'm just going to grab this shot, and I'm going to put it here and see what happens. Everything sort of moves out of the way. This one moves out of the way. And you can drop it. That's nice. Now, I'm just going to delete this shot, and everything sort of slides back. When things are attached, connected, like this is here, if you wanted to move this shot back one, not a creative choice I would make, everything comes with it. And so think of, I don't know, let's talk about a gunfight. So you got a gunfight, boom, you got a muzzle flash, you got a few effects lined up with that to make it feel right. And if you want to move that, you select all, do there's ways to do it in the Avid, but it's like you gotta, if you had 16 tracks deep and you wanted to leave the music where it was and just wanted to take these few things and move them back, it's a little bit of a chore.
Yeah. This is my workaround in the Avid is I put some gap in there and I open a filler just so I have room to move it around, and then when I'm done, I close the filler.
Exactly.
So I don't screw anything up. You don't have to do that here. You can, but you don't have to.
Right. So, this, where there's a little more business going on here. So if this clip will take everything that's attached to it with it. And if that's where I want that to be, lovely. If I want anything to go with this, I can click here and Option Command and click. And now that's another thing that's going to go with it. So magnetic timeline takes some getting used to, but you'll get used to it eventually, and just try to temper the frustration.
Now, conversely, if that clip you've selected, if you were to delete it right now, all the clips attached to it would go. which is
yes.
a
Well, yes and no. Like I'm going to delete it. Okay, so now everything's gone. I'm going to undo that. If I wanted to replace,
you need to be aware of this when you edit.
well, if you hold down Shift and delete, it just deletes what's in the primary storyline, so it leaves everything else just hanging there.
And I want to show, because Mike's using a laptop, I like my extended keyboard. Delete key here, delete key here. They're two different, one here above near the number pad. They work differently. So I don't have to hit Shift. The big delete key actually takes the clip out and closes the window.
I have an extended keyboard here. I never do that.
There you go. The small delete key replaces it with gap and only takes out that clip. I use.
Let me try. Huh. There you go. How about that?
I taught every day. Something.
Thank you.
That's so rare.
And there's also this thing where we've got a primary storyline, but there's other storylines you can add too. So let's say
this is advanced stuff. So we're just showing
just showing it to you. So let's say I never want the sync on these three things to change. So I'm just going to select them and say create storyline. So what it does is it puts them in its own little box. And so now these three things are moving in tandem with each other. There's a lot of uses for this. Picture, which is not connected, requires it. So if we took this picture up here and wanted to fade between the two, it's going to put it in one of these containers, one of these connected storylines.
Requires it if you do a transition on it.
Yeah, and each one of these is its own magnetic timeline. So it's a little bit to wrap your head around. Like, I'm going to take that fade off there. Now, if I shorten this, it's going to shorten the head of this. The rest of the stuff stays in sync relative to it, but so changing sync here isn't changing sync in the other places. If I change sync here, it has nothing to do with anything else. So, and I'm just clicking and dragging here with the A key. So
this is the 2 weeks we warned you about. This is going to be confused by this, and once you learn it, it is awesome. It's powerful. It's time saving. But you have to unlearn what you expect to happen first.
A little bit of an unlearning curve. Yeah.
It's a learning curve.
Some people like to use numerical trimming, like I want it to be 10 frames. Yeah. Okay, so we can talk about that now, where select anything, and you'll notice here there's really not all the timecode windows that there are in Avid or Premiere, but this one kind of serves as a multi-purpose thing. So if you click this, it's going to tell you that piece of black there is 2211. It's called Gap in Final Cut. And I'm going to just click here, double click, and now you see the time reflects there, 2211. I want to make it 10 seconds long. So now that piece is 10 seconds long.
There's a clip after it. What if I wanted both the gap and the gap one over to each be 5 seconds long? How would you do that?
Well, let's see. I'm going to select this one that's 10 seconds and this one that's 3 seconds and 22 frames. And then I'm going to go Control D, which is for duration. Let's see what happens. So I want to if I say 5 seconds, what it does is it changes them both to 5 seconds long. All right, so that's kind of
awesome.
That's kind of cool, right? All right, I think there's one more, and I'm not sure if it works this way, but let's try it. So I've got those clips selected, and I'm just going to say minus. Notice how the little symbol under the viewer changes. I'm going to say minus 30. Okay, so what happened there? Oh, so it trimmed it back 30. Maybe because I didn't have the trim tool. Aha. So if I select this, let's see, I can say, okay, say minus 30. I don't know if you can trim two clips, like trim 30 frames off each clip. Maybe you can, I don't know. But I'm sure somebody will correct us on that once we post this.
We're leaving the door open. We admit we don't know.
Yeah, I don't know anything. So anyway, you can numerical trimming. Just click on something. You can say plus 30, and it's gonna shift that forward 30. If I happen to be on the trim tool and I select it and say plus 30, it's gonna shift. It's gonna slip it 30.
I've done music stuff where you figure out the timing. If you throw a whole bunch of shots in, figure out the timing of the beat, and each one comes at 20 frames, and you have 20 shots in. Select them all, duration 20. They are all instantly 20 frames.
It's a great tool.
Yeah.
So
the clips don't have to be adjacent to each other. They can be spread out. It's really cool.
Right. Let's move on down a little bit. Just looking at our notes here. We'll get to the audio editing in a second. So range selection tool, also handy for certain things. So it's R on your keyboard. And how often does this happen to you where you say, I just want to duck this for a little while. So you say, okay, keyframe, 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 keyframe. You just take your range tool, select and drag, and I'm going to click off that. So it makes 4 keyframes for you and does that, does a dip. That's handy. I'm going to select this business again, and then it selects all the keyframes, and I'm going to delete them. So that's handy.
Didn't know that. Good shortcut. Did not know that.
Yeah, that's a good one. It's also, like you want to delete across 2 clips. It's just, you're setting in and outs just with a drag. A lot of things you can do with multiple clips. Like for example, I got these 3 clips. I want to lower the volume on them. So select whatever you want, and Control minus lowers the volume. You can see the interactive waveforms going there. If you have, over here in the inspector, you have a bunch of stuff selected, and you say, all right, I want this to be, the volume to change to 3 on all of those. It's going to change that. You can add different, you can, go up, go down. You can turn things off and on. You can apply effects, adjust effects on multiple things. Just good to know as part of the tool set. The blade tool. Now, here's one thing that is going to bump people pretty hard, where because of the way Final Cut works, what you're used to doing as far as in, out, delete, just like, let's say you just want to delete a section of your timeline, everything down the line. Let's look at that real quick. I'm going to make this a little smaller so we can see the timeline. Collapse that roll. I'm going to do Shift Z to have a zoom out and see the whole timeline, and I'm going to make everything a little bit shorter. All right. So it happens all the time. Mm-hmm. I for in, the out is marked automatically to the end of the next clip. And if I hit delete, watch the sound effects right here. Okay, so it doesn't delete them. It deletes what's in the primary storyline. I don't know how to solve this problem, but it's something that just has to be handled a little differently. So I'm going to go to the endpoint, which is Shift I, and then I'm going to do Command Shift B, which is blade. So that just made a cut there across all the tracks, across all the pieces of media. And then next place, cut, same thing, Command Shift B. And now if you delete this, as we were talking earlier, all that stuff goes away and collapses. Not optimal.
Cough break, sorry.
Cough break. Not optimal for that. But that's the way it works. And there are many advantages to the way it works. And once you kind of get your head around that particular thing, which is inconvenient, I don't think there's any other way to say it.
Yeah, there's a few things that the magnetic timeline makes 90% of things better. 10% of things you got a few extra steps to do. Right. It's a great trade-off.
Right.
Where there are some downsides to it.
Yeah. So the blade tool, it's B for the blade tool, and it goes through and you make cuts, and you can cut whatever you want. And the zoom tool is, it's a zoom tool. This is why I like to use the mouse, the trackpad, because pinching and zooming, something I like to do. But the typical zoom tool, where zoom in is just that, and then option is out. It's weird. The hand tool is in so many apps, and I don't know exactly. Maybe it's because people, I as a trackpad user, I don't use the hand tool very much.
I don't think I've used it once.
But it's there, and H is the command. All right, so let's talk about audio editing. We touched on a bunch of other stuff. First,
well, one thing you touched on is how you cut the music or the background sound effects they popped up. It looks ungainly. It is not. It is meant to collapse to show as much as you can, and is always going to move everything up as much as possible. You can clean that up. We'll get into showing lanes later. You don't need to worry about it being ungainly and how it looks. Everything's organized for you. So if it really bothers you, there's ways to clean it up, but you can just ignore it. It can be clips here, clips here, and clips there, and it doesn't matter. It's something you fire and forget.
Yeah, it's hard to let go of that sort of stuff. It really is. For me, it was hard to go. I think for anybody, it's hard to let go of like organizational stuff that you've had for years and years.
But audio, we need dialogue on 1 through 4, and look, the effect is above the dialogue. Doesn't matter. If you were to send this to Pro Tools right now, and we're getting ahead, it would separate the dialogue from the effects from the music for you.
Right.
You don't need to worry about it.
Right, and if you want to see things, there's just quickly we'll touch on the lane since you brought it up. Where over here in the in the timeline index, you click on the roles tab, and you can do it for everything, show audio lanes, so it keeps all the effects in sort of lined up, all the music sort of lined up. Let me just turn that off so you can see the difference. So the main difference right there is the effects are jumping up and down, but in a big timeline, if you want to keep your stuff separated, it's piece cake. Let's hide that for now. So some audio editing stuff. Final Cut, I'm gonna zoom in here on this. First of all, you got this little bar across the middle of every take. Pull it up and down, adjust the volume. We talked about the fades, grabbing these little handles at the end of every take. I'm going to zoom in here, and we talked about this earlier, where I'm going to really zoom in. Okay, so zooming back. All right, now that lighter gray area, that's one frame. And you can go in even farther and farther. And so if you decide you want to do some keyframing, I'm just option clicking with the arrow tool here. You can get into all this. In the audio, let's just go audio view only, since we're talking about audio. You can do these keyframes, and the waveforms are
audio editing.
Subframe audio editing. So you can go, the waveforms are going to sort of respond to what you do. They're interactive. And if you want to, I'm going to zoom out all the way from my timeline. For audio that's connected, playing something out doesn't work the way it works normally.
What do you mean by playing something out?
If I wanted to just like listen to it and play it and then stop where I wanted it to stop.
Oh, like, you mean if you hit play, it's not going to just keep extending the edit?
Correct.
Yeah, got it. Yeah, and so this is just getting used to it, and getting used to the fact that one clip has multiple channels in it, and you don't need to worry. You can mix and match, and if you need why don't you show how you can select the audio? There you go, and you see it in your inspector. You can turn off.
Well, yeah, okay, so there's 4 mics on this particular thing. You can see them if you have the inspector open. You can also see them if you expand audio components. That's what those things are called. They're called components. So let's say this is one character, this is another character, this is another character. All of these components can be treated in the same way as the audio at the top level, let's call it. So if you get your R for your range tool and you say, okay, I definitely don't want this, and you can pull that down from that microphone if that's one character, and you come over here and say, yeah, I definitely don't want this, so I'm going to pull that down. And now you're checkerboarding all these mics to be exactly what you want to hear when, and they're sort of feathering in and out, which is that's quite a lot of audio work there. And then you can just collapse those components.
And taking it one step further, if you work on it in the inspection menu, let's say we have 2 lavaliers and 2 booms, and you want to use the lavs, they sound better. You can just go in the inspection menu, inspector, and turn the 2 boom channels off. They will still be there. And whenever you're editing, you're thinking about delivery at some point is going somewhere.
Yeah, and we can also do that here. You know that, right?
Do what here?
Well, if I click on this and I hit the V key, I'm disabling.
You can. There's multiple choices.
Yeah.
And you can disable it there or in the inspector. I tended to do in the inspector.
Yeah.
Unless I'm going to go in there and really manipulate. I want this piece of the audio is too loud. I'm going to drop it down. If I just need to turn a channel off, I do it in the inspector. Or manipulation, I'll open up the pieces in here. But it's all going to the mixer. You turn it off and you forget about it. You don't worry about it. When you're finally sending it over to your audio mix, and you did this months earlier and you forgot and you turn channels off, it doesn't matter. In their Pro Tool session, they will get everything, even deactivated audio, if you want it to go there. It's
well,
really
just
to do it.
Just to tie this back to the Avid a little bit, the custom now with multi-track audio in the Avid is they sync all the multi-track audio, and then they subclip out picture and the first track, which is the comp track, right? The mix track.
Right.
And so you're cutting with the comp track, and if you get a noisy track, then you match back again, so you go to the original clip, which has the audio that you want. You look at the microphones, you figure out what you need, and then you cut it back in, and it's just a complete circus to get back to this audio. And so anyway, I think having the audio at your disposal is one thing. Having the control over it is another thing. So you can really granular isolation of what's going on here. All these tracks, being able to expose them and then hide them again, huge time saver, and you're getting to work with your original audio in the original breakout, and so you know what's there. And if you know what's there, then you can say, oh, well, we don't need to loop that because we've got it clean. It snowballs into this big thing. So understanding that this stuff is all here, when you make your dailies, everything will be turned off but the mix track. So, you'll be working at a particular plateau of audio quality. But then if you need to go in, you can feather in the lav, feather in the boom, do whatever you need to do.
One of my whole project, I've mentioned this before, but anything new with the iXML data your recording mixer is going to get, it won't say channels 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. It will give you the names of the microphones. So you will have the individual names there in the inspector. You can also turn on the option to show them on the actual timeline. And it's another thing that I've used extensively, and it saved me a lot of time over Avid, where you're soloing each individual microphone to try to figure out what it is, and you have to guess.
And we're going to do later on. We'll do an episode on delivering, because the way this delivers, it's lovely. It's all cleaned up. So some simple controls up here, like, for soloing, if you're on a clip and you click the solo button up here, it's going to just play that clip back. Now, most systems have tracks. Most systems give you the ability to mute or solo a track. Final Cut has no tracks. However, you can handle that on a clip-by-clip basis. So if you want to just listen to this part, Option S or the solo button is going to just solo that. See how everything else turned gray. So, but you also can just solo an individual clip, which is a huge deal for me because I want it all the time. And the only way to do it on Avid or Premiere or whatever is to solo the track. I might not want to solo the track. I just want to solo a clip. And here's where it gets a little even more interesting, where you're going to have different stuff on different tracks. If I only wanted to hear this and this, but not this and this, I could solo that. And so that kind of control is awesome. And
I use it all the time also.
So relationships between things, it's a huge deal. And so while you're working, just to be able to see what's there, and again, going back into these the components for this, you can solo individual components, pretty sure. So that's just that part of the audio track and nothing else. So that's a big deal, just for being able to understand, to audition, to get your sound to where you want it to be. All right, collapse components. All right, the other thing, nesting audio, which we touched on the other day. So you always run out of real estate. You always want to save good bits together. You can not only nest picture, you can nest audio. So we're going to nest this bit of audio again, and we're going to call it BG Dining 2, and so that's now all collapsed.
You can jump into that or uncollapse it anytime you want.
You can jump into that, move stuff around. It's going to reflect on the outside. Let's say these shots are going to be a visual effect of some kind, so I'm going to Option G and I'll give it a visual effect number. And being able to nest picture, nest sound, or nest them together, there's never a time you're not going to need that.
And again, said it before, you can nest entire scenes, you can nest a bunch of music tracks. When I was first learning this, I remember asking you if I was taking a piece of music and editing it, and I wanted to go back to a previous unedited version or version I liked, you said, well, just do another music, another pass, nest the music, keep it there. You can turn it off if you don't want it, dupe the nest, and then work on the dupe. So if you mess it up, you still have the original that works. It's really powerful.
Right. So I think we're approaching the end of our list for today for this.
Why?
It's a lot, and it's rambling. So for all of those of you who are still here, thank you.
We are so excited to teach this and show it to you.
Well, teach is a strong word.
To reveal, to explore, to whatever. Je ne sais quoi. I don't know what you want to call it. We want to show it to people.
Right.
There's a lot, and this is the 2-week learning curve.
Yeah, there's a lot to learn, and we're going to be back with some more stuff. few more things we're going to cover about delivering and about sharing, and probably some particular case studies. We're working on that. Good job, Mike.
You too, Mike.
And we'll see you next time on Unauthorized Final Cut 10.
See you later. Bye.
Bye.